Hi, okay, so I'm going to tackle a drawing of a pear in pastel. I'm going to do it in grayscale first of all, and then I'm going to do it in colour. I'm going to try and tackle it from, take a sort of dual approach to this, so both observation and theoretical. It really is the best way to work. If you sort of go purely from observation, we can sometimes not get the rounded form. We don't really understand what's going on, and by the same reckoning, if we just go at all our drawing from a theoretical approach, it can often look a little bit uninteresting, a little bit too polished, too academic, and we often miss the tiny little subtleties that make for very interesting artwork, little bounces of light and things like that. So I've picked out a range of pastels, greys in different values. So I have a dark, I have a slightly lighter, and then coming into a middle grey. These are all quite neutral greys, and then a very light one. And then obviously with pastel, we can change the value or the tone by just pressing lighter on it. Okay, so we get different values. I'm going to break these pastels up so that I've got a little chunk to work with. Okay, so we can create different values with different pressure, and we can also layer up to change values. Okay, so we've got quite a lot of things we can do. So first of all, I'm going to take the darkest pastel. I'm going to use observation first of all and look at what we've got. We've got a centre line, just the same way as we drew with pencil. Same approach, we're going to put the circle of the pear in. Okay, it's leaning at quite a sharp angle. We've got the small rounded top, and as I'm joining up, I'm looking carefully. What happens is it's sort of coming around that sort of rounded belly and then kicking in a little bit and then straightening up. Take a minute to step back and assess that, that's okay. Stalk, and then very importantly we've got our cast shadow. So we have a line, far end of the surface we're working on. Our light is coming from the top left, which means that the light is shining down, and our cast shadow is not coming out there, but it's sort of, that's its end point, so it kicks in just there, maybe a little bit further over, up to here, and we can see now cast shadow is coming down to meet that point, and we have a lovely little flourish there, the shadow cast off the stalk. So now I'm going to go back to my theory. I'm going to switch the light off. And let's think about theory. We have a light coming from here, so our terminator is going to come, if it was just a sphere, our terminator would come across here. Now we've got another one there, so it creeps up a little bit. So there's my terminator shadow. Okay, so I'm going to set in the shadow family and the light family. This all becomes shadow family, as does the cast shadow, which is deeper still. And then I have my light family. I won't set that in with the lightest pastel, I'll choose the next brightest. Okay. I have a very light surface I'm working on. And we can fade that out. Okay, so from our theory, we've set in the light and the shadow family. Now I'm going to break those families apart. So in the light family, I have my let's take my my second lightest pastel. I'm just going to go over that a little bit more. I've got my local value. So this is the value of the pear itself. It's quite a light greenish value. Okay, there it goes. I'm going to come up then for the lighter one to get the highlight. And there may well be a little catch light in there as well that we'll look at when we put the light on. Let's come down to not our darkest pastel, but the sort of dark to mid grey. We've got a softening of the Terminator there, where the core shadow comes in, and we're going to see a little bit of shadow going in that turned form. Okay, let's go back in and get the core shadow in as dark as we can. Okay, and let's go over now onto the cast shadows. So we know that our darkest shadow is the crevice, or that accent just under the cast shadow, which is then going to fade out to a mid grey, and it's then going to soften in turn into the cast shadow with a sharper edge here and a softer edge as it goes away from the light. Let's intensify the white at the table. What do we have left? We have the shadow cast along the back of the wall, so that's going to be very, very dark, and then its light in turn is going to be not as bright as this, so I'm going to go in with my slightly lighter pastel, so it's still creating a variation in tone, but it's not as severe. What do we have left? Reflected light. Let's go in. We can't go in with, it can't be as bright as the light family. So let's go in with our second darkest pastel, and then we might come in with our second lightest and just a gentle touch to pull that up, but that it doesn't become as bright as the light family. And there we have our pear. One last thing I might do is just lighten this cast shadow a little bit, because there will be a difference between two cast shadows, a very dark one and a lighter one. Keeping that crevice shadow, or the accent, quite dark. Now let's switch the light on and see how this compares. So I can see I've got a little highlight here. That makes a big, big difference. I've got another highlight up here. Two highlights on the two rounded forms. We've got a stalk, which has got a light accent here, but not as light as that. And my shadows on my pear, they need to be a little lighter. So from the theoretical point of view, we've made a nice rounded form, but when we go back and look in at observation, we can see that that pear is a little bit dark. It needs to all be lightened up a bit. Very easily done. I just got to make sure that I don't lose all those elements. So I'm lightening up the core shadow, and then I'm going to come and lighten up the main body of the shadow, keeping the core darker, and then in turn I lighten up the reflected light. But it's still not creeping up into highlight. we can lift up the light family a little bit, but we still need to be able to see the highlight. So that's lightened up a little bit more. I'd be quite fairly happy with that. So that's the end of the demonstration for the black and white pair.